This video is going to be a guide on how you can view planning constraints and designations in the platform and a couple of ways you can do it and incorporate it into your workflow. So the first way of looking at planning constraints, quite simply, you're interested in a title, you click onto that title, this is the title lookup, and at the bottom we'll see a section on planning constraints, and you can see this one here has quite a few, including its surface water flooding, and we can turn that on from here. The triple SI impact zone, we've got some flood zone 3, bit of flood zone 2 in there. Conservation area, you broadly get the idea, is that from this section, from this title lookup, we can see any constraints that are affected by relate specifically to this site and turn them on. We've got our blinders up and we can say, hey, look, we've got 30 constraints on the platform. You only need to know about this one. These are the ones that are on. So this is the first way you can view planning constraints in SearchLand, and it's the most efficient way. The second way of viewing planning constraints is to go into your control center, and under here, we can see our various layers. So planning, heritage, and some of the other core ones we have are common ones to turn on. So if we go to planning constraints, you might be thinking, okay, I want to turn on my flood zone 2, 3, conservation areas going to important. Definitely want to see public rights of way. Let's get a bit of green belt and triple SIs in there. You might want to turn them all on, in which case you would just show all planning constraints. Let's turn those off. From here, we can then show these in the platform, and let's go back on. And then we can then see our planning constraints and how they are related to sites like this. So this is another way of viewing planning constraints and simply just toggling them on. If you find that some of the layers are not showing in a way that you want them, for instance, we've got our green belt over the flood zone here, we can reorder these and we could say, okay, green belt, I want you to be underneath those layers, and you can reorganize those as you please. You can then combine your constraints with other layers. So you could say, okay, well, actually, I like ownership. I like constraints in the context of ownership. So if I turn on our ownership layer, I can then zoom in and I can see how these constraints relate to plots of land. So here we've got quite a nice chunky plot of land. That's interesting. It's also outside of the known surface water flooding and flood zone 2 in there. If I was to click on this, it would also tell me that actually these are considerations, but once you've turned them on, they're not as bad as they first seem. So those are the ways that we can do that. Now, if we're happy with this and we've set it up and you've got your view and the view that you like, one thing you can do is save this as a workspace and give this an appropriate name like constraint viewer, and save this. Say it's the next day, you've got a board meeting and you want to show a colleague or client some of these constraints, and you're on your platform and you're trying to remember what you had toggled on. If you go to the control center and do workspaces, you will then see your workspace here that you've created. Click this, it says, hey, these are the layers that you had on, use this workspace and you're good to go. Those are the ways that you can view constraints and layers and designations on SearchLand. And as always, it is about trying to make it personal and bespoke so that you set it up in the way that you're happy with, and then you can very quickly access this and not skip a beat. And that's how you look at constraints on SearchLand.